believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Darren. This is also known as Grimerica, and a great episode for you today. Today, I'm joined from two of my good friends, regulars on the Union Unwanted, and hosts of a amazing podcast called the Grimerica Podcast. Graham and Darren join us today. We have a awesome, casual, fun discussion about everything and anything, some inside baseball type of stuff with podcasting and some sharing some interesting and fun stories. So it was a really fun chat. If you haven't checked out the Grimerica podcast, please do. If you like the Ripple Effect podcast, you're definitely going to like the Grimerica podcast. It's very similar in regards to just having many different guests, hitting on many different topics, so you never get bored. And also, similar to the Ripple Effect podcast, it's a casual conversation. It's not an interview show, which personally I enjoy these type of shows the most because you never know where the conversation is going to take you, and that's what makes it fun. With that said, I have to remind you guys, this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of these shows, which I know you guys do, please consider giving some value back. As always, I know times are tough, so don't worry if you can't financially support the show. Rate the show, review the show, tell people about the show, subscribe to the show on all the audio platforms and video platforms. Rate the show anywhere you can rate the show. And with Spotify apparently messing with my show a lot recently, I've been getting a lot of feedback from people who listen to my show on Spotify in regards to it not showing up, or they can't find it, or whatever. And most likely the show being suppressed or algorithms fighting against it on many other platforms. Rating, reviewing, and telling people about the show can help fight back against those algorithms that are suppressing the Ripple Effect podcast. As you know, since I was banned on YouTube, the show is much harder to find. So even though rating, reviewing, sharing the show doesn't seem like a big deal, it does help fight against those algorithms. And of course, if you're in a good financial situation and you can't financially support the show, please consider doing so and help with the goal of me eventually being able to do the show full time. I have 6 or 7 episodes already recorded, and I just cannot find the time to get them released quick enough. I have to edit them. I have to record the intros, create a thumbnail, write the description, do all that stuff, and then, of course, upload all the episodes, video and audio. It's very time consuming, and as you know, when you have kids and you have a full-time job and you have a wife and you have a family, there's plenty of other things to keep you busy. So with a full-time job, it's really hard to find the time to release these episodes as quickly as I would like. But the good news is, if everyone who listens to the podcast donated $1 a month on Patreon, I could easily do this full-time, and I would be able to get you multiple episodes a week, and you would know that you contribute to helping me reach my goals and live my dream of podcasting full-time. Other ways you can support the show is checking out some of my sponsors. One of them is Richard Grove's University of Reason, which is an online university. You can check out the autonomy courses, click on the links, see what it's all about. If you're looking for a new career path, if you're at a crossroads in life, if you're looking to connect with a liberty-minded community, please check out the University of Reason. Also, check out Element Electrolytes. If you guys are looking for an alternative to water, you just want to add some flavor to your daily hydration, check out Element Electrolyte Mix. It's created by a OG in the health and nutrition community, Rob Wolf, who's been on my show and been on many other huge podcasts, much bigger than mine, and just very respected person in the health, paleo, keto community. And he created Element Electrolytes. It's a mix you put in water. The flavors are amazing. It gives you all the potassium, magnesium, and sodium you need to stay hydrated, add flavor to your life. And with no artificial flavors or colors or any of that stuff, you can stay hydrated while stay fasting, while staying in ketosis. and also fighting against some of the symptoms that comes with dehydration. Sometimes you don't realize you're getting a headache, or you have muscle fatigue, or you're low energy because of dehydration, and this could help. So please use the link in the show description or go on my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com. Every time you use the link for Element Electrolytes, you get a free gift. So please use the link with every purchase. You can support the show and you can get hydrated. Lastly, please check out the Ripple Effect Podcast merch store. You can go to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com to go directly to the store, and we have tons of stuff there. You can also find a link in the show description and on my website, therippleeffectpodcast.com. Check out hoodies, t-shirts, all the stuff that you see me rocking during the episodes are available on the Ripple Effect Podcast merch store, so please check it out. That's it, guys. Enjoy this amazing conversation. I'm going to try to get out the other episodes as quickly as possible, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. Peace. How's life treating you?
Good.
There we go. So you guys aren't together?
No, I'm at home. I have my yeah.
Nice. We'll get right into it then, because I know you guys are kind of limited on time. What do you guys been your show is, it's funny because just the other day I was on your website, and I completely forgot that you guys started literally the same year I started, 2013. And I did, for some reason, I don't know if I knew that and forgot or just never picked up on that. But there's always been kind of parallels with our two shows, because I feel like your show and my show, they're both very similar in regards to, like, you guys dive deep into a lot of different topics. Like, you can listen to one Grimerica episode and think like, oh, I get these guys, I know what they're into, and then the next episode's a completely different guest, which is similar to me. Do you do that on purpose, or do you guys, is it just like, I don't want to bore the listeners, or is it just a reflection of who you guys are? You're just
yeah. I would say it's more of a reflection on who we are. I mean, we try not to do too much of one. Sometimes they kind of come together a little too much. Like recently we had a bunch of sort of energy healers kind of on a little too much, So, I mean,
Graham can get on his energy healers kicks. It's happened a few times. If you could like lay out all 550 episodes linearly, you'd see like, and color code them by topic sort of, and just say energy healing was like pink. There'd be a couple little pink streaks in there. Graham gets on these little kicks, but
it's not me though. It just happens, right? It's not like, because you know what scheduling is like, Ricky. I mean, you got a bunch of maybes in the works. You got a bunch of people that really want to come on. You got a bunch of people you're looking at, you're trying to get, and sometimes they all just kind of come at the same time. So then we got to think, okay, well, like, let's take a break from the energy healing, because we do have a lot of people, promoters coming to us now for guests. Like, I'm sure you get the same thing. Like, you get a bunch of people saying, hey, so-and-so wants to be a guest. And a lot of times they look pretty good, but we do try to balance it out, because there's so many different things we're talking about, because we're interested in so many different things. Like, I'm just interested in a lot of different things. I mean, ancient stuff and, like alternative healing, and we were into biohacking for a while there. It's kind of more of a reflection of what we're interested in.
Yeah. I mean, you guys definitely get into some of that too. It's funny because similar to you guys, yeah, I get a lot of people contacting me, and sometimes you get a little worried, because if you don't know much about them, you're like, okay, could I be tricked into having what seems to be a legit guest on, and the next thing you know, they're a crazy person. I remember when I had I've told this story on my show before, but I'll just kind of go through it briefly. But I remember Dr. James Lyons Wheeler, who's been on my show a few times, great guy, and we kind of connected. And he would suggest people. He's like, hey, he's like, have this person on. I remember he suggested Dr. Henry Ely. It was the first time I was kind of aware of his work. And then he suggested Dr. Jessica Rose. And I just got super busy. And typically, like, I'll research who they are, and I'll see, okay, have they done other interviews, to kind of get a feel of the type of guests they might be, and if I can riff with them, if I'm going to enjoy the conversation. And then, like, the day came, or like days kept going by, and I just never got back to Dr. Wheeler, about having Jessica on, and then eventually he's like, hey, you're gonna have her on or what? I'm like, okay, let's just book her. And then I booked her, and then I got busy again, and I never looked into her, and I was kind of taking his word for it. And then the day of, I remember like just like looking around trying to find some information on her, and she didn't do any interviews at the time, and I couldn't even find a website or anything. So I'm like panicking. I'm like, this is gonna be awful. I'm like, I'm not gonna. And then next thing you know, we just clicked.
Yeah, she ends up being one of your friends and a good one of your favorite guests. So
Yeah, she's definitely a fan favorite, and awesome to talk to. And you could, she's very much like us, where she's like into so many different things that you could just bounce different topics off her and get feedback and have a great show, just completely, casual conversation. But so you never know. I mean, have you guys not obviously I don't want you guys you don't have to use any names, but have you had some shows that you're like, I don't even know if I want to fucking release that conversation?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing where you have some person you never heard of and it just ends up knocking it out of the park. But we've had some doozies, man. I mean, it's good. We never did video for the first couple hundred episodes, and then we stopped doing video again around episode 500. Which is good because I mean, the video keeps you pit. It's good in some ways, but it's annoying in others. But we have had some where we have had the mics muted and we're like maybe burst out laughing in here, especially if we're in studio and we can start like looking at each other when someone's saying something. And and other times we're just like, what is happening? Because we've had some take some hard turns into some grounds maybe you're not expecting, and all of a sudden they're riffing on something that you really didn't want to get into. But I mean, we've had some doozies. I don't think we've ever not released, and actually that's not true. There might be one episode that never got released. Is that true, Graham? Did that math one get totally pulled that time?
The which one?
I forget exactly what it was about, but remember it was like a total train wreck.
Oh, right. Yeah, we did have a couple. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah, we might
didn't
not
release the episode, and then I ended up having to go back, and that was when we were live streaming, and I had to go back and track down the live stream and delete that too.
And partly because he didn't want certain parts of it out. So sometimes you have a guest that's like, oh no, I said too much about this and that, and like he was like sort of running from the cops in some way, and it got pretty dramatic, and we're like, this is great,
weird and dramatic.
Yeah, and we're like, this is fine. I mean, I was thinking, okay, this will be crazy and controversial, but then he didn't want part of it released at the same time, and dude, I don't know. But I mean, we like to take chances like that in some ways. Like we had a couple. I like to have like fresh interviews with people that aren't necessarily making the rounds yet. They're not. So like we had a listener who emailed me from Australia. And him and his mentor are doing mushroom ceremonies every week and healing people. And it was quite a unique situation. I thought, man, we should just talk about this on the show. Like we have an opening coming up. Like, let's just get both you guys on and talk about it. And they showed up with like this face paint, like warrior face paint and stuff. And we're like, oh boy, here we go. And it was fantastic though. I mean, they'd both kind of been through addiction, and they are having these fantastic kind of downloads through these mushroom ceremonies, and they're speaking in tongue and doing, I mean, it was crazy, but it's like, it's going to help people to realize that there's people out there.
It took a minute to get going for sure. In the beginning of that one, I was like, whoa, what's happening? But then, 10 minutes into it, you're like, all right. And then we ended up going, long. We ended up going long. So
yeah, you never know. You never know who you're going to connect with. I mean, I've never not released a show. But that's because anybody who's like super questionable, and I've been pretty lucky where I haven't been tricked into or accidentally researched somebody and then they came on and they're completely different, or they went on some crazy tangent. But it's weird because I'm sure you guys run into this where you have a loyalty to yourself, and sometimes you also don't want to negatively affect the show. Where if I have somebody on, like I've used this example numerous of times when Dennis McKenna was on, And this the first time he was on, it was like not during election year, so it was much easier to just talk about the things I wanted to talk to him about, because the things that I find intriguing about him. You know, I remember we talked about that Neurons to Nirvana documentary he was in, which was phenomenal, and all the, you know, plant medicines and stuff and big pharma and all this. And then the second time he was on, it was right before election time, and he's like just immediately goes into this anti-Trump, pro-Joe Biden rant, and I'm just like, either one, I'm like, it might be interesting if I push back a little bit and kind of just get like a idea of his thinking, and don't just pretend I agree with all the nonsense that's coming out of his mouth. Or two, I let it go and I continue, you know, the conversation. It's like you always have these battles, or even, you know, obviously that's an extreme example, but there's other examples where somebody might say something that you disagree with, and you're like, okay, I could expand on this, and it could turn into a good conversation where you're challenging ideas, and there's a little bit of back and forth. And because I like disagreeing with people, not because I'm trying to one up them or be the smartest guy in the room. If I disagree with somebody, I immediately get curious on like, okay, am I wrong on this issue? Like, let me get their perspective. Let me see why they think this way, and then it's going to help me better understand myself and them. And but then other times you kind of gloss over things, and then there's a concern of like, the listeners know I really disagree with what he just said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know?
But I think it's all about the flow. I mean, a couple times we chose not to break the flow and go into that argument, right? Because it would be a completely different tangent, and it would ruin. Like, sometimes you want to keep that flow going for whatever topic may be hard to articulate at the time. You don't think you can get back to that spot. I want to leave the guest to keep saying what he's trying to say without interrupting him on that. So I think it's one of those just moment to moment things. Sometimes I feel like I can sort of say, whoa, what do you mean about that? Like, I was pretty shocked a couple times we had somebody on.
And it never works out when you get into it.
No, not really. I mean, maybe. It's so weird. It's so weird because when you bring up like Biden and Trump, like, I'm not going to name names either, but we had somebody on that's quite well versed in the whole sort of history of geopolitics and all the corruption and with the elites and the politicians. And yet he was like really just being like a Joe Biden fan. And I'm like, and anti kind of Trump too. I'm like, you don't see through all this stuff. Like, you really think Biden's the savior here? Like, oh my God. Like, so sometimes it's amazing that people even within our community are pretty dogmatic about certain sort of, I don't know, political things. Or, I mean, I guess we're also in a weird time where, you know, every community seems to be split somewhere down the center on these various sort of hot button issues nowadays.
Well, that being said, you ain't getting away with defending any COVID lockdowns, period.
Yes, that's the part that, so I had like Dr. Robert Lustig on. He was the guy who had the really popular it went kind of like a viral video called The Bitter Truth About Sugar, and he was in all the sugar documentaries, the one Sugar Coated. He's you know constantly at the conferences and all that stuff. We do and a lot of his book, that's the thing that surprised me, like you said, the blinders, the fact that you can't see through things. I mean, Dennis McKenna basically debunked the idea that you can take a bunch of psychedelics and you can see through the propaganda. Because I'm like, I know this guy's done a bunch of psychedelics, and yet he can't see through. But you know, Dr. Robert Lustig, same thing. Like, he talks about big food, big pharma.
Yeah.
And yet, like, at the very end of the podcast, he said something about like, I don't know, something about like the COVID vaccine. And I'm just like, well, and I couldn't let it go. Because I mean, this was like during the height of the lockdown, when I'm like, anybody brings up COVID and my blood boils, because I'm just like so upset about like just the world that we're living in. And I'm just like, well, it's not really a vaccine, it's really gene therapy, you know. And he's like, no, it's a vaccine and people should get it. And I'm like, Moderna's never made a vaccine. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's not even a vaccine company, you know. And then, you know, we go in this little debate, and I'm just like, fuck. I'm like, I wish I didn't comment. But then there's times like I had Scott Horton on, which was actually, and I've told this story again on the show too, and not to bash Scott Horton. I'm not bashing him. Scott knows I love him. He's been on the show a bunch, and everybody in the community, you know, loves him. But when he was on, we disagreed on the lockdown, and I was kind of surprised by how he kind of was like playing it safe and being like, well, you know, maybe we should stay at home because this virus and it hit me like, even somebody who has what you think very strong libertarian values, like you'll question your own values when the shit hits the fan. When you think your life's on the line or your loved one's life is on the line, like you'll start questioning like how much do I really believe in this enough to kind of like, walk the walk, and Scott and I actually had about a hour, I don't know how long it was, an hour 90-minute disagreement about the whole thing, and we were disagreeing about the numbers, if they were really manipulated as much as we thought they were, and all this stuff. And it was actually a pleasant conversation, and I got a lot of positive feedback because people at that time were like, you know what, nobody can have this conversation without yelling at each other. It was amazing that you guys could talk about this for that long. And I try to be civil even when I disagree with somebody. I mean, when I had Jack Abramoff on my show, I disagree with him on many things. When I have Roger Stone on my show, I disagree with him on things. So it's like, but you could still extract something from somebody you disagree with. And just because you disagree with certain things doesn't mean they're like necessarily the enemy either. Because one thing we see in the alternative media community right away is that if you have one disagreement, a lot of times people will be like, they're the enemy, it's misinformation, it's disinformation, they're all this stuff. And I'm just like, dude, you're literally wasting energy on people who are trying to expose the same corruption and horrendous people in the world that you are. And yet, like, because you disagree on this one thing, all of a sudden, I mean, 9/11 was like notoriously the big thing where it's like some people believed it was this or that, and it's like, and then you have all this infighting. I'm like, can we just all agree that there's like neocons and shitheads and military industrial complex, like those are the bad guys? Like, stop turning your energy towards each other. So yeah,
Graham and I don't agree on most things, or plenty of things anyway. So, I mean, we agree on a lot of overarching things, but we might disagree on a lot of fine details, which is probably the reason the show's so varied too. I mean, Graham and I definitely aren't into all the same stuff, so we're both sort of tugging in different directions for guests. But I mean, I think it's fun that we disagree about a few things, but
we don't disagree with our
COVID.
guests a lot.
No, we don't. As a rule, we try not to disagree with our guests. As a rule, we try not to. But I mean, let's be honest, no one who's like pro-COVID vaccines coming anywhere near our show at this point. We've kind
that's a good point. Is we've kind of we've kind of put ourselves in that. We've kind of picked a side, even though we didn't want to pick a side and we didn't want it to be about that. But I mean, we've definitely shown our colors as far as where we stand on this main issue right now. So yeah, people are gonna stay away from being adjacent to us for the most part if they're pro-vaccine, which I mean,
all right, adjacent.
well, I think like if
we're also all left adjacent. Graham's pretty out there when it comes to some of this. He's we're probably we could be considered alt both sides depending on who asked us.
Well, I think disagree. The fact that you guys can obviously hang out as much as you do, be as close friends as you are, host as many episodes as you have. I mean, you guys have been just killing it for a long time, and yet you don't hate each other. I mean, you obviously enjoy being around each other. You respect each other's opinion. And you do see that, like you see, like that's one of the parts of your show that's always fun, because it's like you do a lot of your intros, right? Like sometimes you'll disagree on something, you'll have like, it'll be more interesting than the guest sometimes. It's just like, it'll be fun, the little back and forth and debating these things. I mean, look at Sam Tripoli and Brian Callen, their show. Literally that's all they do is argue and yell at each other, and it's like the most entertaining thing ever. It's like, and sometimes they're like legit screaming at it, but it also shows that you can like get mad at each other and not hate each other. Like they you can tell they genuinely love each other and they respect each other to a extent, but it's hard. I mean, it can be frustrating to be Sam sometimes, because to be constantly trying to get somebody to see things your way, and every time you think you made some progress, they'll say something that's so like really, you still believe that? It's that can be frustrating. So I my hats off to people who do that. But what are some of the things that you guys disagree, besides energy healing?
Well,
you guys disagree with?
Terry Wolf. I mean, Terry Wolf was a guest that we had on. I ended up having to interview him on my own, so Darren wasn't there for that. But he's a guy I was a little worried about having on, because he kind of blows holes in all the conspiracy theories, but he's done his research. Like, his book was called Fire in the Rabbit Hole, and he comes at it from a very Christian angle. So it's very much like hey, the revelation is happening, and he kind of like just poo-poos all the other stuff, kind of making it seem very, satanic, right? It's and this is coming, and we have to accept it as coming, and like there's probably nothing we can do about it. But so that was, but I read his book, and we were kind of like, we'd be the antagonists in his book, but I agree with a lot of his book. I agree with a lot of his deconstructions on some of the controlled opposition stuff, or some of the problems with a lot of the conspiracy theories that we don't necessarily delve into a lot on the show because we don't probably resonate with them, like whether it's flat earth or there's other sort of things that I would consider more of like a psyop. We did one flat earth episode, but as far as so anyways, I like, and even when we did that Union and Unwanted with some of the supposed left and more freedom orientated people, we agree on most things. It just comes down to a couple little things, like Terry's episode was, I thought it was great. We agreed on most of it. I just don't really, I can't reconcile sort of the comparative religion part of Christianity. Like there's too much. Christianity seems to come from too many older sort of same old mythologies, but they have their answers for that. And I don't know what's right, but it's just great to talk to people like that have a different view. But as far as Darren and I goes, I don't know. I'm sort of clean and sober. Darren's likes his weed quite a bit. There's one big difference between us. Other than that, I'm sort of more into the sort of the UFOs, ET aspect, the spiritual stuff. He's a little bit more.
Graham stayed on the trust the plan wagon longer than I did, for sure, because we both, and I don't even know where you fall in on that whole Trump and Biden thing anymore. But in the beginning, in 2015 and 2016, we were both sort of sucked up into the
hope,
into the hope that seemed to be him, maybe talking about all this stuff that we've been talking about for fucking, at this point, 3 or 4 years already. And now you got a politician talking about some of this stuff, the 9/11 stuff, the this, that. It's like, whoa, what the fuck? So we got snatched up to that. I think we did an election show, and we were definitely telling people to vote for Trump. And at this point, was that a mistake? I don't know. I would still say probably not, because there was still some sort of great awakening of sorts. I don't know if it's the one we thought we were going to get, but it's the one we got, and it kind of worked in some ways and kind of didn't work in the other ways. And he did still warp speed us. But I got pretty quickly
disillusioned
with the whole Trump thing, and I was like, oh, they're just fucking scamming us more. This is just the new, because I still maintain that Trump is, and you could argue Obama started it too, and you'd have some merit, but to really take it to the next level is when Trump and Hillary fucking come into the ring. And that in my opinion is like a pivotal part of what has become the divide of the West. We see it now everywhere in the West. It's not just America. It wasn't in Canada even at the start of Trump, but it's fucking here now. And it seems to me as the catalyst for a lot of this division. Now, for me, not because they just hated Trump so much, or because, he was a willing participant. I would argue the latter. Graham would probably argue the former, but that was something for a while, because I was off of it completely, and Graham was still kind of hanging on. But mostly it's the UFO stuff and maybe some of the meditation stuff. And then the general public, we sort of disagree on where they fall in sometimes, or where the government's at, but all small details. We mostly agree that we're getting fucked. Just it's in which position.
And so I cried at Obama's inauguration, right? I fucking fell for the hope and change. I wasn't even into politics at all. I didn't even like it at all, but I was like, oh, this is so great. We're going to have change. I fucking got all emotional, and I fell for that. I fell for Obama. And then seeing what happened afterwards. And I just watched a Russell Brand video called "This Is Why Trump Won," right? And it's about time somebody says what was going on before Trump got elected, right? And I was like, we're not going in the right direction here. Something big has to change. So it was pretty divine, the timing for him to come in like that and sort of make sort of hope for other people. But even Darren was saying at the time, there's no way they would have got away with the lockdowns and all this other stuff if Hillary would have been president. Like they would have just been complete revolts from the sort of the more of the freedom side, you know. But yeah, I got pretty disillusioned after COVID too, because I feel like he could have stopped the whole thing in its tracks, and he didn't. You know, he had an opportunity to basically stop it from becoming a global thing, and he didn't take that opportunity. So
Yeah, I don't know if that's, it's weird. That's a really interesting point. Like if Hillary was president, would people be more irate about trying to be locked down? But I guess the other perspective would be, if Hillary was president, COVID wouldn't have been a political issue, because it seems like what got the right or Trump supporters so upset and so anti-lockdown and all that stuff was because Trump was kind of regurgitating a little bit of that. And I like Del Bigtree on the High Wire, like not too long ago, he did a episode about why people who were anti-vaccine, anti-lockdown were also, many of them saw Trump as also one of the people on our side. And he went back and kind of showed some of the interviews and some of the press conferences. And it's like a lot of us look back and we're like, okay, why did I fall for it? And then you go back and you watch the video and it's like, okay, well, this is why, because he he had the balls to do stuff that many others would never have done. Like I remember when he openly said at a press conference that he took hydroxychloroquine. I'm like, what? I'm like, you know how much Big Pharma fucking hated that? Because if the president's taking it, it can't be as dangerous as everybody else is saying. And so there was.
But if you could look that from the other direction too, where it's just another thing to rile them up. I mean, it's like, it's like if Big Pharma is less caring about hydroxychloroquine and the big picture is to just make the fucking two sides hate each other more and more, then that just stoked that fire even more. And then the ivermectin was even fucking worse, because now it's like, when I tell some people that my buddy took ivermectin when he had COVID, they're like, yeah, good for him. And other people are like, what a fucking retard. And it's like, if Trump doesn't get involved in that whole thing, is it even a political issue, or can it just be a treatment? I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
I think
I'm just playing devil's advocate that he could be just further playing that role to divide us even further.
I can see that perspective, but I think a lot of him getting involved was because, and this is why people who like ourselves, who are anti-lockdown and anti-big pharma and could see what was going on, enjoyed the fact that he was being outspoken, because I think the reason why he was outspoken was because he saw, media who he didn't get along with, right, and didn't get along with him, demonizing these other treatments and pushing, the big pharma propaganda. So, and then he pushed back against it a little bit, and then the hatred for Trump made it a political thing, because anything that Trump would say, if you didn't like Trump, you must go in the extreme opposite. So like even wearing a mask became a political statement. It was like, the left's, I think it was Rogan or somebody said it, that wearing a mask was like the left's MAGA hat. It was like, that everything became political. But that's a good point. Like, did it become political because they were using it to demonize Trump, or did it become political because Trump basically got involved in the fight and then made it, political because now he's kind of picked a team kind of. And but going back, some of the things you talked about, like Trump, there's a video out there, I'm sure it still exists somewhere, of Trump talking about 9/11 and how he's been in construction meetings all the his whole life, and he knows for sure that like those buildings, that's not the way a properly built skyscraper should come down, and all, and then obviously when he was running for president, he actually questioned vaccines during one of the debates, and I think they're using it to kind of demonize him and make him look silly. But he does such a great job of of not caring that something he said might sound stupid or unscientific. And he was on stage with I believe Dr. Ben Carson or whoever the other doctor what that was running, and they asked. It was during a debate, and they asked the doctor, like, hey, what do you think about Trump's opinion on vaccines and blah, blah, blah. And then, Trump's clarified. He's like, I think that maybe we are getting too many vaccines at too young of an age or whatever. And then Ben Carson, it actually worked in Trump's favor because Ben Carson's like, oh, you know what? Like, I think he's right in that regard that maybe we should look into that. And then I'm sure you heard the story of him contacting Robert Kennedy Jr. And about being a vaccine czar or whatever he was going to hire him as, and so it's like all these. So
and I think that meeting did happen.
I think it did happen, and
nothing came of it.
Yeah,
because like a couple months later, even before the COVID came out, he was telling people to get their measles shots. Got to get your shots. Got to get your shots.
Well, but and then you hear that what happened with Bill Gates, that meeting that rumor that went around, or no, Bill Gates actually.
No, he said it himself. Bill said it. Yeah.
Yeah, he said that he talked to Trump, and Trump brought up meeting with Kennedy Jr. and he told him like, oh no, he's crazy. That's not true at all. There's no harm in vaccines or whatever. So, I mean, the thing is, I guess my point is that anybody who possibly fell for it or thought that he could be the savior, like I think there was more reason to fall for Trump as a savior as Obama or any of the other politicians who basically just did what all other politicians did, lie, and really didn't give you any real substance. Trump was a outsider in regards to, like, people have to remember, not even his own party wanted to back him. It just got to the point where it became smart politics to back the guy that everybody liked and, looked like he could win. And I think that's why people eventually backed him. But, everybody also remembers that conversation that supposedly happened between the Clintons and Trump, and the Clintons wanted Trump to run, I think probably for the purpose of thinking he could be easily beaten. And honestly, if we hung out to Trump before he ran for president and knew how loose he was, talking and whatnot, we'd probably be like, yeah, if he ran, I definitely would kick his ass. And then he kind of surprised everybody.
Yeah, you're right. And we're in a unique spot because we've been sort of deconstructing mainstream media for many years prior, whether it's just about UFOs or climate change or some other, who knows what it is, right? But it's been just sort of knowing that the mainstream media is sort of bullshitting us the whole time. So when they come out and completely lie about Trump, then it's hard not to go, oh, is that the opposite then? Or is the truth somewhere kind of in the middle, or is it, it's so gross to see it. I mean, we're still in it right now, right? That's what really disappointed me about Trump. Is that he wouldn't back off the vaccines. He knows they're doing damage. All the players must know how damaging these are now. And we're still in the middle of it all. I mean, you guys still have your border closed off to people that don't have their papers. I mean, and Canada too, right? I mean, when are you guys going to open up your border? And we are still dealing with mainstream media right now today saying, despite their official evidence, they have their official evidence that shows you how bad this is, which now they've stopped now they've said now as of June 23rd, they stopped calculating. They stopped sort of taking the data of who's been vaccinated and who isn't as far as hospitalizations and death goes, because it's showing them how bad it is. And they're still able to just keep saying that it's safe and effective and go out and get your fourth booster now. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's so weird to see this happening. This is what we were afraid of happening, and it's actually happening right in front of us, and we can't like do anything about it. You're just like, okay, well, are we going to be in for another, fall where they're going to change the definition of vaccine and fully vaccinated in Canada and force another booster on us, even though the data is obvious to what's happening? I mean, we've got like a month or two left to see if this is going to happen again. And I think they know they've got 30-40% of the people wrapped around their finger, and they've lost a whole bunch too over this. Darren knows a bunch of people that are like, nope, not going after a booster now.
Well, people that are injured. So they're not just, I know some people that are saying they're not going for the booster, but if it starts impeding their life in any way, they're probably going to go for the booster. But then I know some other people that are like hard nose for political reasons, hard nose because the jig is up to a lot of people that aren't, all in. If you weren't all in at this point, you're like, what the fuck is going on? So there's a bunch of those people that have, just had no choice but to see the hole in it, and they weren't kind of ever into the mandates anyway. And then I forget where.
Well, you're saying the injured are definitely.
Oh yeah, then I know some people that have been injured in a couple different ways, whether it's myocarditis, that one. I know two people that have actually got that. I know another person who's dealing with a bunch of joint issues and finger swelling ever since it happened. and another guy who's on blood pressure medication, 36 years old, on blood pressure meds, in great shape a couple years ago. I mean, he's the one guy who I just got a random text the other day. He was like, and I need to tell you you're right. And I was like, of course, about what? And then he called me and explained it all. And it's terrible to see because it's him and his brother are both dealing with the same thing. And it's just like, it's a tough one. But he's like, these people are the no way it's not happening again, because they honestly think they're worried about what that shot's gonna do to them. So I'm curious to see what the next election cycle is gonna bring, because in some ways I just feel like the whole timeline's just ramped up into this sort of weird idiocracy sort of thing where it's like, once it gets to a certain sort of fever pitch, it can't go back down. So it's like, is it going to go back down, or is it just going to keep escalating? Because all the like news stuff just seems to be escalating. It's like, bam, to Ukraine, to this, to that. And it's always kind of been doing that, but that shit is fucking accelerating, man. It was like big time seems to be accelerating to the Roe versus Wade, to this, to that, to the next one. Just, I don't know. It seems to be just like it's getting down to the middle of the record. So it's just spinning faster and faster and faster.
Well, I think a little bit has to do with the fact that the COVID lockdowns and the forced vaccines and all that stuff it connected a lot of people in the right. And, it brought a lot of people together and made them much more politically involved and active and aware. And I think the left now constantly needs things to unite the left. And a lot of people think that the abortion conversation is similar. It's just one of those things where it gets people upset, gets people motivated. The Ukraine thing, like it's constantly finding a way to unite the left and make the right look like the enemy, and vice versa. I mean, it happens obviously on both sides. So I think that's a big part of it. I mean, it's weird because you think that enough people are waking up that they can't keep playing this, using the same tricks and working. But some people are, I swear, like no life experience, no knowledge, no wisdom, no book, no documentary can get through to some people. Like it's mind boggling. It's like, how much more evidence do you need that everything? I mean, look at obviously you guys have been following a little bit of the Hunter Biden leaked videos and all that type of stuff.
That what happens?
What's that?
I seen some memes. I was wondering what happened. There seemed to be some Hunter Biden thing going on, because I've seen some pretty hot memes.
Well, there's been apparently somebody, was it on 4chan or somewhere, where they said that they got into his iCloud and they're leaking out some videos and stuff that's in there. And even the Valuetainment podcast, or Patrick's other podcast, was it a PB, whatever, just had the guy, and I've seen interviews with him before. Is his name Isaac or something? The laptop guy
from Trigonometry, did you say? Or
no? The which podcast he was on?
Yeah, which one?
It was Patrick Bet
David. Yeah.
The Valuetainment.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And he had the guy who took in the laptop telling his story just recently. And it's funny because you can tell he cannot get into specific details, but Pat tried to get some of it out. And he's like, you couldn't believe how much sexual content is on there. And then you look at the diary, and then obviously the leaked video of like, so apparently Hunter Biden had, and we were talking about this on You Unwanted Monday, and I'm like, I gotta go look into this if there's any real evidence of this. Apparently he did have him in his phone, his dad, as Pedo Pete, and somebody explained somewhere why his name would be Pete. It was something about, do you know, Graham, the story?
Well, it was on Union. Somebody said it was from Peter something, was a
character, right?
A character somewhere. So I guess they turned that
Peter Rabbit,
that character, they shortened it to Pedo Pete.
Right? Who's Pedo Pete?
So that's the name that Hunter Biden had his dad in his, I don't know if it was his phone or something, but it like said Joe Biden Pedo Pete. That was like the nickname he used for his dad. And I don't know if you've heard or got into some of the diary stuff, right? And his daughter. I mean, that's the thing. Like, so I'm torn in between trying to figure out, is he because I feel like you can be a decent parent and still your kids can go off the wrong track and become, or he's just a fucking horrendous person. I mean, all the smelling of children makes me lean more towards he's a horrendous parent who is probably his kids are probably dealing with some serious trauma.
Use.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I know I don't want to jump to conclusions and call Joe Biden a pedo, but as a parent, if you watch those videos, I mean, just video after video after video of him doing inappropriate things to children on camera, like sometimes with like a whole camera crew around him and tons of people, and he doesn't mind going up to like little girls and whispering in their ear or touching,
or pinching them, dude. Pinching them,
pinching thing. I mean, to me, it's like, if that's what he's doing on camera, like what could he be doing off camera? And is his son dealing with some, self-medication with using crack and all this stuff because of some trauma? Then you have his daughter talking about being sexualized at a very young age. What the fuck does that mean? It's like there's enough smoke where you can assume something fucking really weird happened to these kids, and they're dealing with some serious trauma. And this idea of like poor Joe because he wants to be, his son's a mess, and it's like, no, man, like he could be a contributor to whatever led them down this path, or he at least wasn't present to help them, because he cared much more about his career. He was locked.
Dude, he's the epitome of a career politician. I mean, and I swear the reason why he got elected is so they could protect the cabal. I mean, they had to protect that whole thing. His whole enterprise needed protection. The only way you do is make him president, so you can sort of not really slander him or not really sort of bring all that out when he's running. So I mean, I think the whole reason he's in there is just to protect his whole enterprise.
Well, isn't that true with LBJ too? I remember when I had Roger Stone on my show the first time he came on to talk about the JFK LBJ book, the case against LBJ, and he talked about that, how he was like, there's all these freaking scandals that were going to blow up, and then he, that's why it was so important for him to become president, so he could make it all go away. And I'm like, oh my god, because you're talking about it now, I'm like, that actually, I'm like, this, it might be a similar situation, and so that's wild. But it's like, to me, it's mind-boggling that anybody can be so caught up in this political left-right nonsense that you're still supporting Joe Biden. Like, to me, it's like, what is wrong with you? Like, nobody can support this guy. I mean, he's first of all, it's almost scary to think that the leader of our free world, that's what they call him, and he's the guy who has these meetings with Putin and has these other world leaders. If you're another world leader and you come have a meeting with this guy and you're like, listen, if there's ever a time to take advantage of the US, it's now. Or if there's ever a time to attack them, it's now, because if this idiot's running the show, but it also, I guess, exposes that the president obviously isn't running the show.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, don't forget though, man, a lot of people do, like, the media's, this is where we really see the media, big tech covering for all this stuff, right? This, the Great Reset, Biden's gaffes, all this stuff. They're fully in on what's happening. So people just, they still don't see it, dude. People, they just go home and watch TV and stuff. They don't see all this. What was that, Darren?
I like the cult explanation the best. I think that we're dealing with some weird cult.
Well, have you heard the podcast, the JRE podcast with Mark?
That's where I heard it from, I think, which is funny because I don't listen to podcasts really, but I'm in between books right now. And you know what it was is the Expanse series just kind of pissed me off by book 7. And I took a break, and I was just driving around listening to music for a couple weeks, and I was looking for a book and I couldn't find anything. And I was like, well, I'll just listen to Rogan, because that does tend to be, if I do listen to podcasts, that's usually the one I'll go to because it's quite varied, and he's got so many that I don't listen for 6 months. I've got a ton I can go and cherry pick. And the top one there was that Mark Anderson guy, and it was a tech guy. So I was like, all right, let's hear what he has to say. And his explanation about the cults is pretty much spot on as near as I can tell, which is kind of the way it seems to turn out, because that's kind of what Alex Jones was saying too, but he's always so like fucking over the top. It's like, even like the frog thing, if he could have just like toned that down, we could have got some real traction. but Turner the Frog's gay, that whole thing. There's real science behind all that shit, but he made it so it's just over the top crazy. And that could be sort of the same thing, but
So what was Mark saying about it being a cult? Like
Alex Jones always goes off about the satanic pedophile cult, blah 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 blah. Maybe, and I mean, Ricky just made some great points about pedo Pete, but all that is a pretty good way to make it sound crazy to normies too. So it could be just
really happening.
Well, yeah, it's really happening to some extent, but it could also, it's just like Alex Jones making it over the top again, and this is more closer to like what's actually happening. Like this is like, because that's what Alex Jones was saying too, but now this Mark Anderson kind of spells it out in a way that it's like, well, shit, that I could see that happening if I had all the money and all the power and was feeling like I'm the shit, and I could see that happening. He lays it out in such a way that it's like, huh.
Yeah, that episode was interesting because it went under the radar. So did the one that he did with Rogan did with Dr. Robert Epstein, the other tech guy who's kind of a whistleblower and really interesting guy. And when you get sometimes these gems of these guests that can say things that we have said, but say it in a manner that's easier for the average person to digest. Like he talked about eugenics, right? And he talked about depopulation, and he talked about how all these things that typically the left is trying to push in regards to like climate change and like blaming humans for putting chemicals in the soil, putting chemicals in the air, ruining the world. Like everything is connected to like demonizing humans. Like we are the worst thing ever. And it's like, okay, you can see how that path will lead you eventually to like depopulation and eugenics. And it's like all these things are kind of linked together. And the way he stated it and framed it, it was a way that like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. You can connect all those things, and you can see how eugenics, and he said on the podcast, which is I'm glad he said on JRE, because a lot of people don't realize that like Hitler's eugenics movement and this idea of like eugenics didn't come from Nazi Germany. I mean, it existed in the US way before that, and even after that, and then that word just got demonized because of Nazi Germany. So that's when they had to kind of rephrase it. But they were sterilizing women in the US. They were doing tons of things that a lot of people aren't even aware that they were doing not that long ago. And then when you look at like the depopulation thing, like a lot of these things are in it seems conspiratorial. It sounds like, oh my God, depopulation, New World Order. But the crazy thing is, as we know, you can find interviews with Kissinger talking about, oh, we need a New World Order, about, all these world leaders talking about like, these aren't terms that people in the alternative media have made up. These are terms that you can find the people who are, promoting these ideas using all the time. I mean, it's like PNAC, right? And I always use the example of 9/11. It's like using 9/11 as a justification to go in countries that had nothing to do with 9/11. Like that was pre-planned. And you look at PNAC and Project for New American Century, like they openly talked about, we have to invade, we have to have more of an influence in the Middle East and all this stuff. So and then you look at the Great Reset book that came out like months after the lockdown started. It's like, you think that's accidental? Like you don't think that there's something to this, that it's not that you think these things are organic? They're not.
Yeah, I agree. Was that eugenics thing, did that end up being Planned Parenthood, and was Bill Gates' dad really involved in that?
Yeah. So
did he
Bill Gates, well, they had a thing called the Eugenics Society.
Yeah.
And Planned Parenthood was initially called, it was like the Birth Control Clinic of America or something like that. It was about, and what they did, Margaret Sanger, who finally they started taking down her name and all that stuff. But for years, like if you brought up Margaret Sanger, you'd be like, oh, the person who started Planned Parenthood. They'll be like, oh no, that's a conspiracy theory. It's like finally they've gone to the point where like they're taking down her name. But what she was doing is that she was putting these birth control clinics in like basically like black areas and like ghettos, and trying to get minorities to not have kids. And so this idea that it's like it's this good thing, like, well, I guess it counts who you're asking because if you ask Margaret Sanger, yeah, it's a good thing. If you ask minorities, that's why I think you look at like a lot of the black community and stuff like that, like they I had friends of mine that like they're skeptical of the vaccine because of the history of like the way their people have been treated, but yet they're like skeptical of government and big pharma, but they're not skeptical of the media. Like they were still wearing masks and they still believe the media. Like they haven't like cut through that bullshit yet and figure that out that well, but they were skeptical of big pharma and the government, which I think is a good thing. But a lot of these things that seem conspiratorial, like you said, this birth control clinics that eventually end up being Planned Parenthood, and it's all linked to the eugenics movement. They had people don't realize that eugenics was a science, a accepted science by the experts and by great minds, and it wasn't like we can look at it now and reflect on it and see it as like this evil thing. But at that time, they were just seeing it as a way of, for the best thing for humanity would be trying to filter out the people who have history of diseases and issues. And, one of the best documentaries on this is MAFA 21, MAAFA, and then the number 21. It's a great documentary, and it goes in through the whole eugenics movement in the U.S., and it has scientists talk of that time and all this stuff, and you're like, this was just something that was accepted like as a way of filtering out the sickest people among us.
And they already thought in the early 1900s, 1930s, 40s, even the 20s, I think they thought that we were already overpopulated and using up all the resources. I mean, they were already scared of that and that was before the increase in population, which is, even though that book that was written in the 60s or 70s, The Population Bomb, has kind of been debunked, they all seem to use that as their crutch right now to push back against it. We have this book coming out on audio called The New World Order from H.G. Wells, actually. So we're gonna have the only audio version available soon on Audible, and it's really interesting because he was apparently swinging with Sanger back then, and it's fascinating. I've got this quote here. Let me read this paragraph from the book. It says, the establishment of a progressive world socialism in which the freedoms, health, and happiness of every individual are protected by a universal law based on a redeclaration of the rights of man, and wherein there is an utmost liberty of thought, criticism, and suggestion, is the plain rational objective before us now. Only the effective realization of this objective can establish peace on earth and arrest the present march of human affairs to misery and destruction. We cannot reiterate this objective too clearly and too frequently. The triangle of collectivization, law, and knowledge should embody the common purpose of all mankind. Now, the weird thing is, like, the way he frames it and the way they sort of thought about some of it back then, it's almost defendable in some ways, like, because he kept saying that you still have these inherent rights, like freedom of speech and to be free, but they're combining it with this like socialism, collectivism thing where it's still for the good of everybody, but you're going to be able to debate it. So I don't know how much of that was like smoke screening or how much they really did believe in freedom of expression, because now you could never picture this all being together, right? You can't picture like collectivism with freedom of speech and freedom of debate and criticism. Like, are you kidding me?
Well, the other thing in that Mark podcast with Rogan that he talked about, and you're talking about people coming together and being a collective. Do you remember that part, Darren, where he was kind of explaining you cannot prevent people from basically eventually starting cults or religions or groups like that's so deep rooted in our nature. We will create religions. And even if you don't think you have a religion, if you're an atheist or a scientist, you are in a cult, you are in a ideology, you have a shared worldview with people in your community, which how different is that than any, traditional religions?
Well, they'll claim that there's no deity to worship, but it's like, well, yeah, you can make up your deity of scientism easy enough.
Well, yeah. I mean, you look at the way that you would worship any of the great minds of their fields, right? I mean, it's kind of the same thing, right? So if you look at like who created biology, like that's who you're worshiping. You are
Darwin or Fauci or whoever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's same thing, but it was interesting. He did a really good job of explaining that and how you almost cannot have a religiousess type of society. Like it's never existed, it never will. And I know we talked about via email a little bit about Michael Millerman. Have you dug deep into because this goes into, and I've heard I'm sure I've heard me say this at probably one of the Union of Unwanteds, but it's another piece of the puzzle of why I think the West hates the Soviet Union so much, the Russians, because I think their philosophy, their worldview is so anti-Western worldview, and what they're trying to create this like, Russia still has traditions that they think are important and all that, and important for a community and a society, and the West is trying to pollute all that by saying like, let's rethink everything. What's a woman? What's a family? What's all these things. Have you dug deep into Alexander Dugin, Michael Millerman, some of those philosophies?
No, we're booking Millerman on the show, so I trust. You know what I mean? This is one of those things where I haven't done my research yet because I have to wait till it's booked, and then I'll dig into it and read their books or listen to their shows or whatever beforehand. So it's kind of one of those timing things. That's what, because we've got 2 or 3 shows a week now, it's like I have to cherry pick what I research and when I listen to stuff. It's kind of like it's got to be sort of about the show and the topics that we talk about.
But it's one thing that I talked to Michael Millerman when he was on my show, because I ran into this Millerman and Alexander Dugin. Like if you're researching them, you'll also end up researching Leo Strauss. And I remember going into some of Leo Strauss's work and finding a interview with Peter Thiel at the Hoover Institute, right? And apparently he's huge into Strauss, and they were talking about how Leo Strauss, and it's funny because Peter Thiel, he's kind of reminds me of Musk, where it's like you talk about issues that you're also contributing to. It's like you talk about these issues like you're not connected to them. It's like, Elon Musk in one interview talking about the dangers of AI, and then the next interview talking about how he's helping promote, AI. And but Peter Thiel was talking about how Leo Strauss had this theory of the Enlightenment, right? And how it became a bad thing. Basically how we looked at the Enlightenment as this idea of like, oh, now we're not just these supernatural religious people who
superstitious,
and religion caused so much grief and division in society. And now after the Enlightenment, we put that all behind us, and we're smarter and more science driven and fact driven. And then, Leo Strauss and Alexander Dugin, a lot of these guys, they think that what happened is that also pushed us into the world of materialism, because instead of you finding spirituality or inner peace as important things, like if you don't find inner peace or happiness, meaning, right? Like then you're going to find meaning somewhere, right? Like it's a lot of the reasons why people do, drugs or self-medicate with alcohol, because they don't have meaning, they're not fulfilled, and then they're looking for happiness or meaning somewhere. And if this drug either puts a band-aid on it for temporarily, you'll do it, or if this drug makes you happy and you don't have happiness anywhere else, you'll continue doing it. So the Enlightenment could be to blame for a lot of these issues.
I love that.
Yeah, right.
I agree with it. I mean, I think it culminated in the 1800s, where there was almost a resurgence with the popularity of theosophy and spiritualism, and there was all kinds of phenomena happening. I mean, Charles Fort wrote about it in his books, and I think there was a point where we almost went back to that spiritual reality, but it got squashed. And I mean, it culminated in the World War I, and now we're back into like, it sort of changed the world, but it was close. But I think we lost. You could look at it another way and say, well, look at how spiritual people are as well, that materialism, or at least atheism isn't running the show. But I mean, they kind of are. We're still stuck in that materialistic paradigm, even though 80% of people don't believe it.
Well, they still like stuff. I mean, can't we have both?
No, it's not about stuff. It's about you being a non-meaning physical being with no consciousness, like no real extended consciousness, right? It's not about stuff, not materialism as in like materialistic. It's materialism, right?
So I could still have the stuff.
You can still have the stuff.
Okay. I'm in. If you want to check out those audiobooks Graham was talking about, you head over to adultbrain.ca. There's a little button right on top there that says Our Books on Audible, and it'll take you to a growing list that's up to about 65 or something like that. So if people want to check out that, they can do that. And then, of course, the other cool thing we're up to is the tours, which people seem to be really enjoying. We're going on, I think, our 11th one coming up, 10th or 11th one coming up, and 12th. This fall with Randall Carlson and the Scablands. We're doing a couple tours there. And then we'll have a tour in February in California over at Mount Shasta, Shasta County, doing our Magic on the Mountain with Joe Roop and Brandon Powell and Owen Hunt and maybe some other people. We're working with some other podcasts on that. Well, obviously the Brothers of the Serpent. We work with them on most of our stuff, but maybe another California-based podcast we're still working out the details with. And then we got our 420 bash in Utah next year, which is a lot of people's favorite event, where we go to Bryce Canyon and Zion Canyon. We go to Bryce Canyon in the middle of the night and check out all the stars and stuff like that. And we do cold stuff with Brandon Powell and do the Wim Hof, all that sort of stuff. And when, you can go side-by-siding on the flex day, or you can go hiking. And next year we're kicking it off on 420. So it'll be a bit of a party on that 420 night. And then we're there, of course, for the 4 days doing all the stuff I just talked about. So people head over to contact@thecavern.com if they want to get on those events. They're all sort of small number, intimate, and super interactive. Like, you get out in the field with Randall Carlson and a couple dozen other people.
That's awesome. Yeah.
For like a week.
For a week straight. Yeah.
That's awesome. So for you guys, are you guys podcasting full time basically? Because you guys seem so busy that I'm like, you have to be doing it full time. How do you find?
Well, I am. Darren still has a day job, but I'm doing the books. I'm doing the books and the podcasting and stuff full time. Darren does a lot of the organizing for the Contact at the Cabin, but yeah.
That's awesome, man.
I mean, we're trying to make a go of it. I mean, it's tough. It's tough and tight right now, but it seems to have potential. I mean, it seems to be working.
Well, it's just hard to get like 0.001% of the thousands of downloads to actually contribute anything. And I get it, because like, I just have a hard time believing that all my listeners are as poor as I am. I just expect them.
Exactly.
Like, I know I'm bad with money, but you guys can't all be bad with money like I am. Like, I'm sure some of you guys can contribute something. And there's, obviously I'm sure we all once in a while get some really not incredibly generous guests or listeners that will contribute something or buy merch or do something to try to help out. But yeah, I mean, it is one of those things where it's like this. It's not that I care about, the money, because I hate asking for it. I hate even saying it's a value for value show, which was influenced by, you guys and No Agenda. And, but it's just one of those things where it's like, if you don't mention it, then you'll get less people contributing.
Exactly. You have to beg for money. We didn't want to do it either. And then we decided, look, we have a bunch of expenses now. It's starting to get expensive. So we're like, okay, let's start asking for money. And people started donating. So we kept asking, but you can't get it unless you ask. So
I know.
And now that's my livelihood. So we have to make a go of it. And Darren wrote a couple of great books too. We should talk about that too. And one of them's on audio. The other one's coming out, but that's at a CanadianShame.ca, right, Darren?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's about the Canadian residential school system, and the second book is called In Their Own Words, and it's about the people talking about their experiences through, I guess, like the decades of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, maybe, Darren, kind of thing, or 70s.
Yeah, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. The ones that are still alive in 2015 and 20 when they did the commission. So,
which isn't too long ago, when the government was fucking forcing Indians out of their home to go to these fucking schools, right? I mean, this is the history that's missing in people's contextual, view of what's happened, right?
Darren is Howard Zinn, right? He's the Canadian Howard Zinn. What was it? Howard Zinn who wrote the book?
Who's that?
It's neither. Now I'm second guessing myself if it's really
Howard Zinn
Google to make sure I'm talking about the right person. But he's the guy who wrote the book about American history from the Native Americans' perspective.
Oh,
yeah, which was kind of a really popular. I know he passed away now, but yeah, I mean that's a really important perspective to get, like an important point to understand is that there's multiple perspectives on every historical event, and the one that you're reading might end up molding the way you look at that event. But if it's like that documentary. You ever watch that documentary Hellstorm? It's also a book. It's about the Germans' perspective of World War II, and it's the author and the filmmaker is like, well, there's enough books demonizing Germans, and there's enough books from everybody else's perspective. Here's a documentary and a book about, and it's not about the Nazi Germans so much as like the innocent civilians.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, who were just basically getting raped by, and the thing about the Soviets and everybody else who treated the innocent, farmers and civilians poorly, they were the bad guy. They were grouped in with the bad guy. So even if you didn't agree with what your country was doing, which is quite freaking common. I mean, look at that war. There was plenty. I mean, I lived in this country. I didn't agree with what my government was doing. I don't agree with what they're doing now.
I don't agree with anything they're doing right now, it seems.
Yeah. So but there should be more of that, which is fascinating. And Michael Millerman, that's one thing he talks a lot about too, is how he started understanding Plato and some, the Republic and some of these old philosophers from a Leo Strauss perspective, because all the philosophers he liked were people who were into Leo Strauss. So their understanding of Leo Strauss and his worldview influenced the way they were translating some of these old books and the way they would look at it. It's fascinating.
I'd love to know what he thinks about that, and also about what happened with the natives and the Indians, because it didn't seem like it was always going to be that way, but something shifted in the mid 1800s, again, that 1800s era where the British Empire kind of decided to start clamping down and getting rid of the spirituality of the Indians and like making them conform, right? Which gets back to that Enlightenment. They thought they were superior, right? Like that they're savages and that we need them to conform because we're better in some way. Like yeah, I'd love to know what he thinks about that.
Well, this reminds me, and I know you guys got to go, so I won't hold you up too long. Did you ever hear that debate between Dan Carlin and Sam Harris? It's an old one. Speaking of debate, go back and if it's still available on your website or wherever you guys have it, you guys have one of the best vaccine debates. Before Del Bigtree was a household name, you have that vaccine debate that you guys hosted with Jeff and Pat from
right
Farm. That's a oldie but goodie. If people are listening, check it out. It's one of Del Bigtree's, I think, more fascinating debates because they really go into the science and everybody was kind of respectful, but they did a really good job of going back and forth. But the Sam Harris, Dan Carlin conversation, it was supposed to be a swap cast to kind of turn into a debate, and that was exactly the point that Dan Carlin was trying to get Sam Harris to understand and that's another oldie but goodie, kind of went under the radar. Nobody really listened to it, and at least people I was paying attention to, nobody talked about it. I'm like, dude, you guys have to listen to this, because Dan Carlin was trying to explain to Sam Harris, he's like, listen, you think somebody from the Middle East who has these things about their culture, maybe the way they dress, that they need saving based on your perspective. They grow up in that culture. The way a woman is dressed, to her might not be a suppression of her body. Like she just sees it as culturally, that's the way they live. That's what they eat. That would, so he was trying to make the point, like the point you're making, like this idea of like people look at other cultures and if it's different than theirs, they think like, oh, they must want to live the way I live. and I should
Yeah,
see them
yeah,
for
we're
that.
civilized. We're the best.
Exactly, you know, which I think is a fascinating point. But I don't want to keep you guys up too long. Obviously, most of these links and most of the things we talked about is on grimerica.ca, right?
Yep,
Yeah,
you
that'll
betcha.
get
Yep.
people everywhere. That they can find everything through there.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, guys, for taking the time to chat. We'll have to do this more often. And,
Yeah, for sure.
and good luck on
Totally.
the next show, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Ricky. Have a
Ricky.
great night. Thanks for having us.
Hey, thank you. Take care, guys.
Yeah.